My name is Matteo Vallone, and I work in the apps and games business development team. And in my day-to-day job, I work with both apps and games developers. So I thought it would be interesting for you as app developers to learn more about what successful games developers care about. And not only that, I will try to extrapolate some rules that you can apply in your day-to-day job. And also, I will show some examples of how these rules have been applied by apps developers. But before that, I want to spend some time talking about why we think games and apps should learn from each other. What are the relevant things that they have in common? But I don't want to oversimplify this. Actually, I want to address the elephant in the room right away. It's much more difficult to make money on apps than games. We all know that. And it's not only because it's generally more accepted to pay for games than apps, but also because games have much more flexibility in their mechanics in what they can do to actually monetize users. They're also selling virtual goods, so there's endless possibilities of what they can sell and the price points they can put together. So they basically can do whatever they want in terms of selling virtual currencies or virtual goods in a game. For apps, that's not possible. But the math is always the same. Apps and games, in both cases, the dominant model is the freemium model. That means that this equation on the right here, that is always true. CPI, the cost per install for your installs, should always be lower than the lifetime value of the users that you're bringing in. And that means that in a world where CPI is rising because there's more competition for store visibility, for user acquisition, in order to make this function work, you really need to focus on the right side of this equation. And lifetime value is a function of retention, engagement, and conversion and monetization. But it all starts with retention because that's what drives engagement. That's a measure of engagement, and that's what drives monetization. So retention is king. This data from mobile intelligence company Quetra show how actually this is so important. For both apps and games, here you see a comparison of retention curves of apps based on Google Play Store ranking. Here you see that the top games and the top apps, they all have better retention than the ones below. So even if the curves are a little bit different, games tend to have shorter-term retention because they have less longevity than apps. In general, this is always true. So it's not only something that games developers should care about, also apps should really care about retention. And going a bit further in retention, the key metric that you should look at when you try to optimize your long-term retention is frequency, because that shows how many times a user comes back to your app. If users come back to your app often, chances are they will get hooked by it. They will make it part of their daily routine. That means they will be retained and they will become your users forever, hopefully. That shows, this graphic shows how different apps category and games genre have, they're mapped along two metrics. One is the frequency per week, so how many times a user visits on average those apps in a week, and the day 90 retention, so the long-term retention, the end of that curve that I showed before. You see that while they're different, it depends on where you are in this category, there is a direct correlation between the two. All right, so retention is king, and games know this very well. They spend a lot of time optimizing for that, and you see how...
The icon needs to appeal. So,
sorry. You see how pretty much every successful game developer, and here are a few highlighted here, they tend to, before launching a new game to the public, they do what we call soft launching. They pick a test market or a beta community, and they spend a lot of time optimizing their game, tweaking it, to the point where the retention figures are satisfactory. And this process requires a lot of discipline. A lot of games get killed during this process. But it also ensures that they invest resources in the right product that actually has a chance to be successful, and where that equation that I showed you before works. If you don't do this already, retention can be measured very easily through Google Analytics. And this is the report that you can look at that shows on the top your retention curve. This is your app retention curve. And also, it shows a breakdown of retention figures by cohorts of users that install the app in a given day. So you can also optimize and see how it impacts retention. All right, so now let's talk about some things that you can actually learn from the games world and apply in your day-to-day job. The first one is focusing on the engagement cliff. This is very important. I'll show you again. I'm showing you again the chart with retention figures, because there's something else that can be noted here. You see how, in each case, regardless of how successful the app is, most of the users are lost in the first 7 days. That's where everyone loses. And actually, the top apps are the ones that are doing a better job, especially in the first 7 days. After that, the curves tend to flatten for everyone, so there's not much difference between different apps. But those first 7 days are critical. Here you see on the right an average day 7 retention. So after those 7 days, how many users are still in the app for different categories on average. Again, this is Quetra data. And you see how it varies between 40% and 15%. That means that on average, 60% to 85% of users are lost in those first 7 days. And that's because users need to try an app. They install a lot of apps, but then they try it. And those first few days, they actually decide whether they want to still using it or just leave it there. Once they decide, once the app is good enough, then chances are the users will stick. And actually, that's why the curves flattens here. But those first 7 days are critical. Games know this very well. In a game, onboarding is quite challenging. You have to teach a user new rules, new mechanics, why you should care, what is the story, lots of things. So it all starts with a tutorial, and I want to show you an extract of a video that we recently shot with a very successful game developer called Pixelberry that has a great completion rate for its tutorial. It's 75% of people that actually start a tutorial go through each session of the tutorial. So let's play the video and we'll comment that.
Players coming in, we hit them with story right away. And we try and do it in a way where it's a little more natural. You know, we are cognizant that a lot of people playing games on mobile phones may not want to read too much text. So we try to ease players into that. But by the time they finish our tutorial, we're hoping that they're already caught up in the lives of these characters and they want to learn more about their backstories and what's going on.
I think it is important to give people kind of that sense of progression in a game, especially in mobile games, because I think with a lot of games you can reach a certain point where you're just repeating the same actions and you want to feel like you're doing something different. And I think story is a great way of differentiating that and saying, you know, oh, now you're dealing with a new villain, or now you're dealing with a new issue that's come up.
So they talk about two key things. One is the story. They use story to hook players right away, and they rely on that to make sure that it's compelling for the user to stick around for the whole tutorial. The other thing they talk about is progression. Progression is very important in games because if you think about it, the game is always presenting you with a new challenge. If you get a sense of progression, you keep playing the game. Otherwise, it gets boring. Those challenges shouldn't be too challenging, otherwise you leave the game. So it's always finding the right balance between making you stick around to play the next challenge, but it's not too difficult for you. And I actually want to show you how this concept of progression and onboarding goes beyond the tutorial with this other example of Playdots, another very successful game developer. This is a chart that shows all their levels. They're mapped along two metrics. One is revenue per player in that level, and lapse rate, how many people left the game in that level. By tweaking the difficulty level and the experience in the levels that are below the red line, so the underperforming ones, they actually managed to improve not only retention, but also average revenue per paying user. So again, the message here is, this is very specific to games, of course, but the message is, it's not only about the tutorial, it's about how you communicate and foster a sense of progression within the whole game. Okay, let's try to extrapolate some rules for apps now. The important thing here is that in the first 7 days, there is an engagement cliff. The user is presented with a new app. They have to understand how it works and start playing with it and understand the value. And you want to ease that cliff as much as possible to help them going through those first 7 days to the point where they will probably stick around. So the first thing to do is finding features that provide value to the user without asking much from them. Something that you can show them and they can experience right away. And after that, you need to understand the activation moments. What are the key things that you want the user to do in order to fully experience your app? And that requires some engagement, some commitment. For example, creating an account, uploading a video, finding some friends, adding some preferences, something that personalizes and makes the experience deeper, but requires also some actions from the user. And you should present those things gradually. You should help them going through each one of them step by step instead of overwhelming them with everything at the same time. As a consequence, also, part of that is that you should manage the appearance of paywalls, especially in those first few days. You don't want to scare people off or overwhelm them with the requirements. So that's a general rule. And something that can help you optimizing your app along this rule is the flow report in Google Analytics. This shows you how users, on average, move between different screens in your app. You can see the path they take, and more importantly, with the red lines here, you can see where they get out of the app, what are the friction points, what are the roadblocks, and potentially remove some of them if it makes sense. So it's very useful reports to use, and I want to show you an example of an app that did a great job applying these rules recently when they redesigned their onboarding flow. Overall, they achieved 20% better day 7 retention, which is a great figure. The way they did it is that, first of all, let's talk about dating sites and apps. They require a lot of things to set up before you can actually enjoy and use a dating app. You have to create an account, you have to write something about yourself, you have to start answering some questions about yourself, liking some people, and uploading a photo. A lot of things to do before you can actually use the app. They redesigned their onboarding to make it more gradual and step by step. And I'll show you what I mean exactly. First of all, this is what they had before. They required you to write an essay about yourself, upload a photo, answer some questions, and like some people all together in the same section of the app and with a series of modal windows with no clear sequencing. So the user felt a bit overwhelmed and like, oh wow, there's a lot of things that I have to do before I can even use this app. And if you see on the right, that's just answering the questions. Even when you go in one of the tasks, it feels quite overwhelming because you have to do, it's not that engaging and there's a lot of things you have to go through. So this is how it looks after the redesign. The first thing you see when you download the app is 5 questions about yourself. It's very easy to go through them. Right, yes. You swipe right is yes, swipe left is no. Once you finish that, then you're only then asked to upload a photo. If you want, you can skip this, so you can enjoy the app even if you don't want to upload a photo now. But that's the only thing you need to care about. After that, then you can start enjoying the app. And you are also reminded of other things that you should be doing in order to fully experience the app. But it's just a call to action, and you can do it whenever you want. And again, this is step by step. Once you do this, then they push you another action to do. So it goes from a very low engagement, very easy to go to tasks, to a bit more complex once you actually start enjoying the app. All right. So now users have decided to stick around. You have done a great job at onboarding and communicating that sense of progression. But let's talk about how you can monetize them. I want to talk about how games look at this. Even the most successful games, no matter what you do, a big percentage of users will never spend a dime in that game. And games developers are cognizant of that. The key thing there is identifying as soon as possible the users that are more likely to spend and start targeting them. And even then, once you identify the people that are actually going to spend, understanding how much they're willing to spend is really powerful, because different users will have different propensity to buy, and targeting them with a different experience or different offers is where you can optimize much more than applying a one-size-fits-all approach. I want to show you who does a great job at this. This is Space Ape, a successful game developer. Their games are Samurai Siege and Rival Kingdom. What they do here is they segment users based on the first 7-day behavior. And they predict the lifetime value of each user based on the way they they engage with the game, and also they tag them with different spend patterns, the way they spend and buy things within the game. And then they start targeting these users with different offers. Let me show how it works. Here are all the users. They're hitting Space Ape servers. They start, say, Space Ape starts analyzing them, and then they're assigned to a segment. Here they have 5 segments. I want to show you just 2 as an example. One is predicted to have a medium lifetime value, but the pattern here is that they spend a lot in one single chance, in one single purchase, and then they tend not to spend too much too often. The other group is higher actually lifetime value, but in a single spend, they spend less. Even if they're predicting that over time, these users are spending more, in a single spend point, they tend to spend less, but the frequency will be higher. So then they expose them to different offers, different bundles of items, where the medium lifetime value with high single spend point and low spend frequency sees a very big bundle with lots of stuff in it, quite expensive, but it's just buy it once and probably you never come back. You're going to use it and for the rest of the game. While the medium spend point sees a smaller bundle, cheaper, but probably you're going to come back and buy more. So that's very powerful. And if you want to extrapolate a rule for the apps world is you first have to realize that different users are going to want something different from your app, and especially they will have a different value perception and a different propensity to spend. And if you can identify them and target them with a different offer that is more customized around that, that's where you can optimize your conversion much more effectively. An example, a tool that you can use to start learning about your users and how the different segments behave and start thinking about what you can actually do to tailor their experience is, again, Google Analytics. This is the segment builder in Analytics. It lets you create segments with lots of options. I want to show you just the behavior category of those options. You have sessions, days since last session, transactions, and session duration. So you can create a segment based on that, for example. And here we have 2 groups. One is highly engaged people, and the other one is less engaged users. And those segments will then be exposed in pretty much every report that is in Google Analytics. So, for example, this is the revenue report, and you see instead of one line for revenues, you see revenues for highly engaged users and revenues for less engaged users. So you can really start understanding how they behave and what is bringing you each segment. Who does a great job in the apps world at targeting different users with different value proposition is Wish. It's an e-commerce app. And very simply, they have a group of people that are less engaged and one is more engaged. To the less engaged people, the feed of products that they recommend is less expensive because it requires less commitment and less engagement to actually thinking of purchasing them. While once they see a bit more engagement and some conversion, they start recommending more expensive product. So quite simple, but it led to 10% better conversion just by doing that. All right, the last one I want to show is selling umbrellas where and when it rains. This is how you sell products instead of what you sell. If you look at this screenshot from Pretty Simple, another game developer, Pretty Simple Games, they made an art, not only a science out of this. And I want to show you an example of how this can be really optimized. Playdots, again, the developer we talked about before with the progression chart, they also redesigned their purchase flow across the whole game. And overall, they achieved 10% better revenue per active user, which is a big number because it's for all users, so including the ones that are not paying. So overall, 10% revenue per user is quite an achievement. And I'll show you a couple of examples of what they did. The first one is, before you start a level, you see a card that shows you some stats of what you have, and it prompts you to buy things that you might need in that level. It's not the old store, it just prompts you to buy specific things, in this case it's boxes, that you might need in that specific level. And similarly, when you die in a level, basically you run out of moves, the first thing you see is a button that lets you buy extra moves that let you finish that level. Instead of starting over again and just going back to the store and buying those, you can buy them now and keep playing the level. By doing this, they obtain 6% more paying users just by adding these two call to actions. The other thing they did, they moved some products, some in-app products, within the game experience. So instead of having them exposed in the store only, they also highlight them on the bottom of the game. So whenever you want, while you're playing, you can purchase them. It's one tap. This led to 5% better ARPU. Overall, if we want to simplify and generalize this for apps, it's about selling umbrellas where and when it rains. It's not only making purchasing accessible and easy for users so that it's as close as possible to their experience, is one tap away or two taps away, but also triggering some call to actions when and where is very relevant that specific product that you're selling. Who does a great job at this in the apps world is TomTom. They recently moved from premium to freemium, and they saw 2.4 times more paying users. And that's because they moved in the right way. They actually thought about their business model, and now they could sell upgrade to premium in a very clever way. I want to show you how. The model is that you have 75 kilometers for free. You can use the app for 75 kilometers and you don't have to pay. It's a real metering model. It's real meters. And then you can upgrade to 1 year or 3 year subscription. And the first thing they did is that they made that upgrade button always available there. It's on the bottom of the app. Wherever you are on the app, you see that. It's one tap away. You can upgrade. And you also see the countdown, how many kilometers for free you still have. So 75, 74, 73, you see the progression, and you know when you need to hit that button. The other thing they did, very similarly to the other example I showed you, they trigger some call to action when it's quite relevant. For example, if you start a new trip, they know that you're probably going to run out of kilometers because that trip is quite long and you only have 40 kilometers, for example. They trigger a call to action that says, you want to upgrade now? It's better probably because you don't want to upgrade when you're driving or you might not have connection or you're abroad. So things like that. They also trigger a call to action when you're running actually running out of kilometers and when you run out of kilometers. But the point here is that it's relevant and it's easy to do it, and I understand why I should purchase the upgrade in this moment. All right, to wrap up, the rules are 3. One is addressing the onboarding as an engagement cliff. And so start by analyzing your day 1 to day 7 retention figures in analytics and thinking about activation moments that are gradually more invested for the user and how you can introduce them in the app. The second one is embracing your app's multiple personality disorder. So understanding that different users want different things and you can target them with different ways, especially when it comes to in-app offers and propensity to buy. And the third one is about not only what you sell, but how you sell it. And we say that it's like selling umbrellas where and when it rains. Make it easy for people to buy, but also very relevant and triggering call to action when you think the most chances are that the user will convert. So thank you for listening to this.